as much as it looks like entire world is running behind AI and everybody has figured it out, and we are the only one who is left behind. Even the biggest banks in the United States are struggling to make AI work.
The reason people are confused is they see AI as this sort of consumer-facing product that you use Claude or ChatGPT to figure out your own life or plan your travel or plan your menu or whatever, and they don't necessarily see how that translates into business and into business tools that can be used in the real world.
You cannot expect a farmer in Zappa to install your app from the App Store or Play Store. It's just not going to work. It looks good on paper. You can do all the branding and all that.
The understanding of how we do things, I think, is like probably the most critical thing for any kind of AI adoption. Unless we really have it, it sounds very simple, but then it can't really be broken down into very granular steps, then AI adoption sort of becomes very, very difficult. What could be the first step that can allow me to go beyond chat and start deriving value for my organization?
So I'll give the context to save time. Kailash is leading AI transformation at a US bank from Nepal, which is crazy, right? And being in a heavily regulated environment where you can't just throw AI to employees and expect AI adoption to work. So my first question is very relevant, is what worked, what didn't work, what were the mindset shifts that were required, and the development sector being in a similar position where every dollar needs to be accounted for, the donors need to know where the money is going, right? What suggestions do you have for a similar regulated industry like the development sector from the lessons from your work with bank?
Yeah. Am I audible? Okay, good. Thank you, Punit. A very good question, right? The way I would like to answer that question is, AI is one thing that's where everyone in the world is trying to figure out how to use it beyond ChatGPT and like beyond Q&Aing with ChatGPT and Claude. Obviously, that has caught on like fire with everybody. I think most people are using these chatbots to be able to do their work better, to become more productive. That's a use case that's pretty much correct. But a big promise of AI was that any big organization, when an enterprise decides to spend their money in any new piece of technology, they look at it from two perspectives, right? Is it gonna save us money? Is it gonna optimize our cost? Can it reduce our expenses? That's the one angle they look at it from. And the other way to look at it is it going to allow us to make more money? Like, is it going to bring us more revenue? So unless there is a very clear, crystal clear possibility of either bringing in more revenue or reducing the cost, right? An enterprise is especially hard for big enterprises who has their own procurement system, who has their own IT systems, where every use case has to be go through several gates before it becomes widely adopted in the organization. So these use cases have to be established. And I'm sorry to say that, as much as it looks like, entire world is running behind AI and everybody has figured it out, and we are the only one who is left behind. Even the biggest banks in the United States are struggling to make AI work, right? So there have been use cases here and there. There are experiments that are happening. There are innovations they're trying to create in different pockets of the organization through different channels. So they're like localized success. Yes, there's enough material and enough evidences that AI is working. But in terms of changing the entire organization, in terms of creating new products, in terms of creating new revenue streams, that's something that was meant to be one of the promises of AI. But it's not totally correct that even big enterprises are struggling to figure out what's the best way to make use of this technology in those areas, right? So your question about how should any organization, especially development organization, should adopt it. First, they have to realize that it's a very incredible piece of technology, but everyone is in this journey of trying to figure out how to make the best out of it, what works and what does not. So create room for experiments, try at a very small level, try to get some early wins with fewer number of people, because once it goes out in the open and it does not work expected, and support tickets keep piling up, the conclusion an organization reaches to is, oh, this is all fluff and all hype, and it does not really solve the problem. So it's always best to experiment in a small group with a strong hypothesis, and make a clear case of how it derives or adds value in the organizational processes. And once you have a clear use case, a winning use case, then go out and then sell it to everybody in the organization. I think that's how you should go about it, in my opinion.
Yeah, Jay. I have a follow-up question to that, but then I'll come with that question to both of you. Probably, James, a bit of context from where you are coming from with such a large experience across organizations. A bit of context for the audience, and then probably we can go there.
From my background. Yeah. So, I mean, I have an unusual background for this room has already heard most of it, but came out of Microsoft where I was 15 years, long before there was AI. I mean, just to date myself, I started working at Microsoft when there were DVD-ROM products. So I've seen the evolution of technology from the inside of a technology company and trying to understand where machine learning fit into all of that in education. Eventually, I started working in more sort of consumer tech and worked on Xbox, on the very first Xbox, and then eventually moved into educational workforce development. And that was before AI. And we were trying to think about how do you use technology most appropriately in the classroom. And at that time, it seemed like a lot of promise. And now there are a lot of questions about how you use AI in educational contexts, and do students use AI? How effective is it at driving learning or not? And so I think my perspective on AI is coming from both as a consumer of AI in running my own company now, but also in having that context of having worked in the social sector and seeing how technology can either be a hammer that's looking for a nail, or it can be a hammer that finds a nail and can be really successful. And when you were talking, I was thinking about just in big companies, and my company works with a lot of multinational companies, sometimes on technologies that are being used in agriculture. And what I'm seeing is, particularly the IT teams at big companies, just this frothiness right now around AI. I don't know a better word for it, where the executives say, we have to get AI out there. We have to use AI. And then that creates chaos of people and groups trying to build tools that use AI. And no real sense to it. And so I think I love the idea of starting small and then building support from there.
I think when we look at adoption reports across the world, one thing that we definitely see is that everyone is struggling right now. But there are enough smart people in the world, right? So does it mean that all the smart people are flocked to ChatGPT and Anthropic and all these big labs? What do you think is the reason that everyone is struggling? Most of the world is struggling with AI adoption. It is an amazing technology. Everyone is using it. There would be very less professionals in the world who are not exposed to ChatGPTs or Geminis or Claudes of the world. But what do you think? Where do you think is the real problem of why are people not able to bring it to enterprise use?
I won't claim to be an AI expert, but my take on it is that people sort of see it. Most people see it as a what they use in their day-to-day life, something that will help their research be better, or their writing be better, or write an email, but not necessarily how do you tone it for actually solving business problems. And I think the banking context is quite interesting, as are contexts in agriculture or contexts in healthcare. The real power of AI comes from being able to take these massive data sets and turn them into analysis that will give you different insights. And that can happen in many different contexts. And I think the reason people are confused is they see AI as this sort of consumer-facing product that you use Claude or ChatGPT to figure out your own life. or plan your travel or plan your menu or whatever, and they don't necessarily see how that translates into business and into business tools that can be used in the real world.
We work with a lot of organizations on AI adoption and topics related to that. One thing that we have definitely seen is that the kind of profile that are having initial success, let's say, because in the last 1 year or 2 years, we can't really say it's massive success, already initial success. And we're looking at a aid sort of a dynamic where there's a lot of resource that is getting shrinked. The abundance of resource compared to what it used to be a few years ago is not the same anymore. Uh, if if you were a development agency or a partner in development sector, who would you give the responsibility to lead AI adoption to actually lead the organization into the post AI world?
When answering this question, I'll also like to touch on the question you just had for James, right? One of the regions AI adoption fails at enterprises is enterprise is a completely different beast. What I mean by that is it's made up of a lot of people, right? It's made up of a lot of different processes that were designed maybe 10 years ago. And you cannot just come in, drop a technology, bolt into an existing process and expect that it will become a successful,
Yeah.
right? It also depends on how the leadership in any company, any organization is positioning AI as. If you, there's already so much fear mongering in the world about how AI is going to eat your job and stuff like that. And if you position AI in the same way in an organization where, oh, okay, we'll bring in AI and we'll eliminate this department, or then people are going to resist it, right? So secretly, everyone is, no matter what you say in big events, an organization is made up of an individual, and an individual is motivated by things that work in their interest and not necessarily in the organization's interest, right? So there has to be something in like this whole AI movement. There has to be, if it's not inclusive enough, like all the benefit we draw from AI, if everyone does not see how they fit into that picture as well,
But that's a tough job, right?
there's a lot of resistance, right? So most of the banks are, for example, compliance and risk management. Banks are, risk management company, right? They thrive by managing risks, right? And most, a biggest budget in a bank goes into the compliance team, right? Because they have to comply to so many federal regulations. And when you bring in a new technology with the goal of cutting down your compliance headcount by 50%, for example, people are going to find reason to fail it, right? So that's why what I'm saying is the region enterprises struggle the most in AI is, first, AI is not perfect. So it works for 90% of cases. It does not work for 10% of cases, right? And if you do not position it as something that is inclusive enough and that something that would benefit everyone, the people in the organization would use that 10% of cases that does not work as a reason for shutting down the idea, or making claim that it does not work for them.
Yeah.
So it's a people issue, it's a culture issue, how the leadership tries to position it in the organization, and how the adoption and change management happens.
Does that mean that it's probably a better thing to start something new right now than trying to remorph an existing organization, however small or large it might be? Because two-faced problem, right? One is a people problem, and the other is a technology problem. And again, coming back to the same question, who do you think is the best kind of profile who can sort of navigate this kind of change?
Yeah.
Jim.
I wanted to go back to your first question. Where should AI change in the social sector? I'll come back to the second question. And I think that's really interesting. And I think it parallels sort of big organizations and some of the challenges in big organizations. And some of the most successful models I've seen in the social sector for adopting AI have come from the ground up, have come from organizations who understand the local context, who have the ability to tap into local data sources that might not otherwise be available. And we spent a lot of time here in this session talking about how civil society organizations are sitting on a landmine or sort of a gold mine of trust, because they are in the communities, they're working in the communities, and AI becomes a tool to be able to build the data sets that will allow others to think about how they fund work in the future. There's a great project that I'm familiar with in Malawi, called Ulangizi AI. And it was a pilot project that was run by an NGO called Opportunity International. And what they did is they took all of the Ministry of Agriculture information about farming in Malawi and built an AI language model to learn that information, so a very specific data set, and then built a front end that was on WhatsApp, which is what farmers use. They could be used with voice or text, so it worked for farmers who might not be fully literate, and it was served in local language. So it was locally relevant. It was built on local data sets with relevancy to what those farmers face. So if they had a crop blight, they could just type it in or take a picture and they would get answers back, almost like an extension worker who was driven by AI, who knew everything about Malawian crops and crop disease and so forth. And so that's a really good use of it. And it didn't have to come from the CIO or CTO. It came from organizations working within the ministry to capture the right data.
Yeah.
So in all that talking, I forgot your first question.
Who should lead? Who should lead AI adoption moving forward? What kind of profile?
In social sector organizations? I think most social sector organizations, at least unless they're a multinational NGO, probably don't even have a CIO. They might have an IT manager who's keeping the email going. But I think the magic of AI and something like Claude Code is anybody can learn to build data insights on information that organizations already hold. I think the other thing, just in the development sector, there's so much data that's been gathered over decades of work. And Nepal is actually one of the oldest recipients, or it was one of the oldest recipients of USAID funding in the world. And so just imagine the amount of data that sits in people's computers and NGOs and in other places here. And you don't need to tap into that data. So it's finding somebody with a passion who can start small, as he said, and sort of build an idea and get management on board to build those data sets. And what those do is give you insight into the future of how development should work and evolve in Nepal.
Amazing. Kailash, did you have something?
Yeah, I think in terms of who should lead it, I think the very first question any organization, especially even in the development sector, right, need to answer is they need to have a very good understanding of the problem they are trying to solve. What I mean by that is, in this world, everything exists in a value chain. Every organization creates something that is consumed by somebody else, right? So the reason I'm saying this is AI is disrupting these value chains. Right? What I mean by that is things that were previously taking a lot of time, or things that were previously not possible or feasible, are now becoming possible, right? So now, as a result, how the money flows from the donor agencies and how organization takes it and creates something and passes it on to something else, we need somebody, like, you cannot just take AI and try to solve the problem that probably was important in the old world and is not relevant in the new world, for example. So if I could do it my way, I will draw a value chain, a clear value chain of what input an organization takes from its suppliers or vendors or donors or customers, and what does it create for somebody else in the value chain, right? And then I would, now that every organization has this power and capability of AI, which of these things that was previously taking a lot of time and is now just now becoming possible or feasible, right? We need somebody who has a very good understanding of how this supply chain works, and then use, like, technology always has to come second. Technology, you cannot start with a solution and go around finding a problem, right? You need to have a very good understanding of how your organization works, who your customers are, who your stakeholders are, and why you have designed the processes the way they are to serve these stakeholders and customers. And now that you have power of this AI, which of these processes no longer make sense, and which of these processes can be augmented. So you need somebody who is able to sketch out all of that, right? So all this to say, I am not very fond of uh, giving IT team the responsibility for this, because you know they tend to have a very restricted version of what's possible because of the way they are positioned in an organization. So we need somebody who understand the business context, and who can empathize with the user, we can clearly see the vision of how AI is going to transform a certain process, and then work with different stakeholders, bring them together, and first, create an experiment on a small scale, get some early traction, and then go around and then advocate for it, evangelize it at the leadership to the organization, and then help with the broader adoption. Right?
You touched on something really important, which is starting with the user, starting with the person you're trying to serve. So the reason that worked in Malawi is they went and talked to a bunch of farmers before they ever designed something. So they were actually creating a product or an application that was right-sized for what those farmers needed. And starting with the user is the first step. And even before you think about change management, is you have to understand who you're building for. And then that's part of the longer-term change management process. And I love the idea of just AI looking for a problem. There's another example in Kenya, and I don't know who actually funded this, but they had a business mentoring app that they put together using ChatGPT, and they gave it to a bunch of small, very micro business owners in Nairobi, so small shops and restaurants and people selling on the street, to see if it would improve their businesses. And unfortunately for the low-performing businesses, they actually did worse once they had the AI tool. And the top-performing businesses did better. And here's why. The poor-performing businesses would ask very complex questions of the AI and get a whole bunch of answers, but they didn't know how to discern those answers. Whereas the top performing businesses asked very simple questions, get simple answers, which apparently help their businesses. So it has to be right sized for the people you're working with, and there has to be that element of change management and adoption to give the trust that that machine or that tool will actually give the right answers.
Yeah, I don't have a question. For the sake of saving time, I'll just comment on the difference between the two projects that I noticed. One is the AI came to WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And the other is the AI was a separate app.
Yeah.
Right. I think that is and the gap that you saw in the two projects, where one was inclusive in terms of it was valuable to people who had the least access to technology, and the other one kind of dividing the society into the people who get undue advantage from AI versus the one who struggle even more, right? I think this is really understated. A lot of solutions, like the development sector is all here. If someone says, I will build an app that solves an X problem, tell them to shut up. Tell them to build a bot on WhatsApp instead, right? Because asking someone to install a separate app is just such a huge friction for people in our side of the world. The AI has to come to the messaging platform that's already installed on people's phones. You cannot expect a farmer in Zappa to install your app from the App Store or Play Store. It's just not going to work. It looks good on paper. You can do all the branding and all that. And then it feels like if you do it on WhatsApp, it feels like you are kind of, it does not brand as well. Right? It's just a WhatsApp bot.
But it's relevant.
But it's more relevant. Yeah. So we need to really be careful on like what's the medium of delivery of the AI. It's very important.
I think the other thing that we see in multiple sort of places is that everyone is stuck on AI amusement parks. There is one app, and then we go and take that app to 15 people, who might be at the same level of AI nativity as the person showing, but there's a lot of like, oh, this is amazing, this is great, and things like that. But then I think that's a really really big problem to actually create those small little cases that don't go really far, don't scale. Just a quick last note, so that there is some kind of takeaway, also additional takeaway for the audience. I'm stuck at chat. I'm stuck at chat. What you're saying is a bit complex for me to
Right.
actually get to, right? And then my entire team is stuck at chat. So, what could be the first step that I can take, or what was the first step that you took? Because now you can see from the lens of an AI transformation from the other side, right? So, what could be the first step that can allow me to go beyond chat and start deriving value for my organization?
Yeah. I think the first and foremost, right? Uh, every individual has to be aware of. So this is takeaway for everybody else as well, right? Aware of what value they are adding in an organization. Okay, what I mean by that is, I remember when, like you mentioned, chat, right? When Claude came in and it was able to create beautiful PowerPoint slides. Every like in especially in the sales team in my organization, and they got very excited and happy, and everybody thought that sales is a solved problem because AI is able to create all these beautiful slides and all these beautiful artifacts and all this beautiful visualization. But you know what? If a sales team thinks very hard, they would realize that their job was never to create a PowerPoint slide at all. Right? That's not why you are doing your job. That was a unavoidable distraction that was present in your pursuit of sales in the past. That is gone. Your job is still to persuade somebody else to buy your service, right? So, what I mean by that is every person in the organization first needs to understand that my job is not to write emails, my job is not to create these big documents. It never was. Right, it was just a thing you had to do it, something you could never avoid in the pursuit of something bigger, right? So that awareness needs to come. So in order for the broader adoption beyond just Q&Aing, right, somebody has to, I mean, not everyone is good at vision, not everyone is good at being able to see big picture, and somebody who is actually gifted to be able to do it has to show this vision to the organization, right? They have to start with I know the very first question they have to ask to every team is, okay, here, if you're doing sales or if you're doing donor relationships or if you're doing stakeholder management, how do we do it today? Like, what does the process look like? Who are involved? How the people interact with each other. You need to have a very good understanding of how something happens today. Because with AI or without AI, those things have always existed, right? The bigger purpose has always existed. It's just that, and with AI, this bigger purpose does not change. It just creates a different way of doing the same thing,
Yeah.
right? So you have to start by asking people, how do you work today? What is the bigger workflow that you fit into today? And what does it look like? What the challenges are? What's working? What's not working? And then you have to sketch it out and then figure out a way to embed AI into these processes in a way that is inclusive of all the people it touches on, right?
Yeah.
By not alienating people, by not fear mongering among people. I think that's
If you don't include the human element
Yeah.
of it, everything you produce will just look like AI.
Yeah.
And so you have to have that gut check in it to make sure that if it's replacing a process you're using, that somebody comes in and says, is it actually doing it more efficiently, or is it less efficient?
Just want to reiterate the last thing that was there in the conversation. It sounds painfully trivial, and then we can obviously have more discussions during dinner. But then the understanding of how we do things, I think, is like probably the most critical thing for any kind of AI adoption. Unless we really have it, it sounds very simple, but then if it can't really be broken down into very granular steps, then AI adoption sort of becomes very, very difficult. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time. Was wonderful, and thank you so much. Please have a big round of
You guys
applause.
were great.